Thank you. Thank you for that. And I apologize for jumping up early on the last one. I was just very excited to get up here and talk about strategic core systems modernization. As mentioned already, Terry Buechner, I work for AWS. I'm the principal core insurance specialist there. I've been with AWS for a while, and what I'm going to talk to you about today is both the strategic view of core modernization and, of course, how it applies within this idea of using AI to transform insurance, but also provide some practical steps in order to get there. Quick background on myself. I've been in the industry for about 20 years overall. I spent a little bit more than 6 years now at AWS. I've been on our technology partner side as well as now on the business development side. I've worked at Majesco running the digital consulting practice there, and 12 years at IBM. Christian and I know each other from back in the day at IBM. 5 years of that I spent in Japan and 2 in Latin America. So significant experience outside of the United States and beyond. And one quick fun fact about me, I think, is that I am a volunteer firefighter in my hometown. So I put out metaphorical fires at businesses as well as real fires. And it's interesting, we had a little tea ceremony before we began, just a little bit earlier with the chairman, and we talked about how in some ways people are losing, because of AI, their ability to reason and think for themselves. And one good example is automated directions, using your NavMe app or some other app to tell you how to get from one place to another. And people are forgetting how to use their own brains in that. And actually, in my department, we have a highway that runs through our village, and it has a river next to it, and it floods fairly regularly. We actually spend a lot of time fishing people out of the water after they get their cars stalled in a flood. And they often say, well, they're just following their map. So they don't think about the consequences. They're not thinking about what they're going or the fact that there's a body of water in them. They're just following their navigation map. So I will talk a little bit about what I see and what I hear from customers like yourselves in the industry, what's going on, the headwinds that are there, and how legacy systems, legacy insurance core systems are affecting that and are affected by that. We'll talk about modernization, which is very important, key really to leveraging AI, whether that's generative AI or more traditional forms of that, and some next steps, and I'll leave some time for Q&A, of course, as well. So let's talk about what we see in the industry. Now, I'm not here to tell you about your industry, and in particular the Korean market. You know your industry very well. But rather, this is because everything that we build at AWS comes from direct customer feedback. We listen to our customers and build based on that. So that includes the kinds of services and solutions and partners we work with in order to help to modernize and leverage emerging technology like AI. Now, what do we see? Certainly the environment has changed. And in the 2 previous presentations, we've seen some of those changes. And that was a very cool view that Kyung-hee just showed us about what the image of insurance or the image of the world would be 60, 70 years ago after the war, and how some of those changes have come to pass. Today, customers want to buy in a very different pattern from 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And insurers have been slow to catch up to that. Digital products, digital channels, omni-channel, always on. This is how customers expect to be treated by their insurance companies. Often they expect to be having the kind of service and lack of jargon that you would get from a chat engine, ChatGPT, or one of the other ones that are out there. Insurers are a little bit slow to pick that up. They want to be able to have hyper-personalized products. They want them to be very clear and very transparent. They want them to be very cheap as well. Whether that is an individual, a family, a small business, large business, the patterns have changed, but insurers are slow to keep up with that. And one of the major reasons is because of the prevalence of legacy systems, however that's defined. An older system, typically still on premises today, maybe mainframe based, although less so here in Korea, I know, distributed systems, et cetera. These systems cannot keep up with the demands of generative AI and others, and are keeping insurance companies from taking full advantage of some of the capabilities that we've seen today. Of course, as Dr. Andrews was pointing out, there are many concerns around bias and other things that need to be managed and governed throughout, both from a technical perspective as well as an overall governance perspective. but they can't even get there if they're having to deal with legacy systems and are unable to really transform their business and take advantage of the new capabilities. And those capabilities of a modern core system, generative AI aside, are quite clear. We see these stats all the time directly from customers. I'm sure you've run into them before, but faster time to market, getting closer to your customers, really understanding your customers, growing profitably, entering into new markets. All these things are very important. One of the most important ones, which often gets overlooked, is the last one on the bottom left there, which is engaging with your employees. Employees today, on the technology side in particular, do not want to work with older technologies, with COBOL or even Java in some cases. You really need to have a modern technology stack to attract and retain top talent. Our model, when we look at this, and this is where I would encourage you to think about this, including in the generative AI context, is this idea of the modern digital business. So modern digital business, this is based on our own Amazon experience and AWS experience. First and foremost, on the upper left there, is obsession with customers. So whatever modern technology or innovative approach you're taking, at the heart of it needs to be the customer. Thinking about your end user customer, whether that is an individual, a small business, a large business, on the general insurance side, on the life insurance side. Extremely important that you think about that end user customer, not just the distribution channels or other stakeholders in the process. In addition to that, you need to be agile as an organization. We call this being organized for value. So you've identified your customer. Now you need to be able to focus your operations to succeed, to help them succeed. We call them two pizza teams, meaning they're small enough to be fed with two pizzas. So small teams, agile teams, teams that are enabled and empowered to make decisions. And part of that is building a test and learn culture in there too. In insurance, we are typically very conservative. So this idea of test and learn, really being able to fail fast, that kind of goes against what our general nature in insurance. But in order to be truly customer obsessed and modern and digital, you really need to build that in. But at the heart of all that, which is my point here, is that modernized core. You need to have a modern core and a modern data estate so that you can truly take advantage of all these pieces and be customer obsessed. And in insurance, as we've talked about in the previous conversations, data is more important than oil. It's the most important asset that we have. But it's most often, or very often, locked up in silos. We can't access it, can't do anything with it. Cannot take advantage of generative AI. So we need to be able to unlock those data sources and really start to strategically use data in order to feed into that customer obsession. Digitalization, the image I'm trying to get across here is around a superhighway. You think about rolling out new products, moving into new markets, being fast, being agile. Very hard to do that and get onto that superhighway, leverage generative AI. If you have legacy systems, regression testing, release management, planning, overlapping code changes, all these things are roadblocks on our way to hitting that superhighway. And you don't have to just listen to me. These are stats from PwC as well as from Swiss Re and others around this. 70% on average of IT budgets go to just keeping the lights on, just maintaining those legacy systems. Very hard to invest in generative AI and other capabilities to leverage some of the things that Kyung-hee was talking about around telematics and Internet of Things and all these capabilities. Very hard if all of your money is going to just keeping the lights on. 70% of the time is spent on those core systems. So if they're not modern, then you're really spending just additional time and effort on just keeping the lights on, as I said already. And 51%, more than half of insurance executives say they can't truly get to know their customers because their data is locked up in those systems. All right, so that is the why. Now we're going to talk a little bit about how. So there are various views or approaches to this, different ways of approaching it. One of the most common and easy starting points is just to try to achieve some cost savings around this, to try to lower that 70% that we're spending on just keeping those systems running. Relocating with containers or VMware onto the cloud, lifting and shifting as well, rehosting if you will. And there's some value to that. You can get started fairly quickly, you can save some money, build up some skills within that modernization and migration approach. You can also repurchase a new system, a newer system, a modern, born on the cloud system to run some of these operations. But where AI starts to come into the puzzle, and just in the past couple of years has really started to accelerate this, is when we think about replatforming, rewriting and reimagining some of the existing legacy code. But while the technical approach is very important, and a key thought that I want you to take away from this is that you need to start with the business goals in mind. Think about that view I was showing you about that modern digital business. These are ways for you to think that through. And these are just areas that I've engaged with customers on. You may have your own, you certainly have your own approaches too, but really think through, what are you trying to achieve? Are we trying to lower friction? Are we trying to get closer to our customers? Are we trying to increase profitability by creating a better underwriting system? There are many different approaches here. But in insurance, we tend to be very high friction processes, a lot of manual processes, a lot of paper involved here. So think about how we might be able to lower that. Also think about how we can grow profitably. We can grow fairly easily in insurance by just lowering our prices, but growing profitably, that is somewhat more difficult, of course. Dynamic pricing, better underwriting, risk management. Now, we're pretty good in insurance on the general insurance side of managing risk at a large commercial level. But how do we start to push that down onto the individuals as well? Proactive outreach to those customers if there's a pending flood, for example, or the likelihood of a pipe breaking within a building because you have sensors in place. It's a lot of cool new technologies that some of us have talked about already, but you need to be able to have a modern core to take advantage of them. And then that third column there, how do we get more products into the hands of more customers? Really thinking outside the box in terms of insurance, product development, and distribution. For example, trying to get into embedded insurance. So embed insurance in travel is the most common version of that. You probably have some of that here. But how do we start to embed insurance in other processes, make partnerships with others, and start to think more holistically about how we can engage with customers there? So, as I mentioned, one of the most common starting places is simply to re-platform onto the cloud. Move that monolith that you have onto the cloud. It's a little bit easier to maintain. It helps you get out of the data center, can help you lower costs as well, build some skills in terms of migration and modernization. But where we start to see real value is when we can decouple those down into microservices. Now, and AI, by the way, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a bit, is really starting to open up new ways and new approaches around doing that. But we can decouple these down into the key business domains, so underwriting, policy administration, claims, et cetera, and then think about how and why and when to start to modernize those. In some cases, for these big monolithic systems, more than 30% of the applications within there have no value whatsoever. They're running, you have to spend money and resources to maintain them, but they have no real value. So going through the process of decoupling allows you to look into them and start to think, oh, well, we don't really need this application, we can get rid of it. This other application maybe is very specialized for us, so we can rewrite that one. This other application is not particularly differentiating, and we can use a best-of-breed SaaS solution in order to take advantage of that. And this allows us to think about that buy versus build decision, which often in insurance we think of as binary. I'm either going to buy a partner solution, a package solution, a commercial off-the-shelf solution, or I'm going to build it myself. And in insurance, the tendency is to build them. We think that every application that we have is truly differentiating. So it's up to you as leaders to think about, are these applications truly differentiating, or are they not really adding value? Are they things that we can use a commercial off-the-shelf system, or is this one that we really need to focus on and can help us understand our customers better, create a straight-through process for claims, whatever that happens to be, but really be intentional and think about what those business processes are, what the value is behind them, and build from there. So our approach to how to help you to do this, now we're getting into the practical piece, is something we're calling the Model Carrier Sandbox. Now, what you see there on the left, or I guess from your perspective, yes, the left, is a legacy architecture, and I know my colleague, Christian, has a very similar slide. This is a real insurance company's legacy architecture. You see the classic spaghetti bowl there with all these different systems in there. Very complex, very hard to pull out what the individual business processes are within that. We're helping insurance carriers to modernize and simplify this process and move to a modern architecture. And what you see there on the left is a model of various partners, and it's very small, I realize that, but that's not important because the names of the partners are in and of themselves not important. The partners that are available here in Korea, for example, are going to be different. All the different business processes there, what you need to take away from that is that these are solutions that you need to decide on that buy versus build journey, reimagining, rewriting, repurchasing for a new system, and then moving toward that decoupled, loosely coupled architecture, what we're calling the integration fabric, in order to get that done quickly. And here's a view of what that looks like. Very simple, very standardized, omni-channel approach at the top. That's the way our customers want to interact with us. However you approach that, being able to integrate via APIs to those core systems. And those core systems, will allow for a very hybridized approach too. You may want to keep the policy system on premises today, maybe outsource or have a managed service for the claims system, and rebuild or rewrite the underwriting system on top of that. So this allows for a very hybridized approach, and even across different cloud service providers too. You can have, for example, the omni-channel system in one cloud provider and the core systems running on AWS and on AWS. Giving you access to, via this, the modernized data estate, the ability to engage with analytics as well. Whether those are quote unquote traditional analytics like predictive analytics, but also of course into AI, generative AI, business insight and other capabilities as well. One last thought on this, and then I'm going to talk about a few case studies around this and then open up to questions, is that generative AI, we've talked a lot about the very cool use cases around understanding your customers better, being able to dive deep into analyses about customers, underwriting claims, et cetera. Generative AI is also very good at helping you to modernize and begin that modernization journey for your core systems. So think about being able to analyze the code, to be able to automate code conversion as well, to be able to refactor in an automated way to new modern, from COBOL to COBOL on the cloud or COBOL to Java, for example. Creating infrastructure as a code so you can provision servers without having to do so manually. Microservices breakdown as well, being able to, in an automated way, take that monolith and break it down into those business functional areas is hugely important and really moving the needle in terms of speed to modernization. Automated testing, and of course, as I mentioned earlier, engaging with your employees, your IT employees. How do you transfer knowledge from all of those legacy system experts who know COBOL and older languages who are retiring or perhaps have already retired? Generative AI is very good at helping you to gather that information and be able to document and transfer that knowledge to the next generation. Okay, so just a few customer stories just to highlight that it's not just talking about it, but these things are actually happening in the real world, in real time. The first is Allianz Trade. They're actually on my slide about the modern digital business as well. This is the classic breaking down in an automated way the monolith down into microservices. So they recognized that this monolith was not flexible enough, was not fast enough, was not agile enough to help them, to allow them to interact with their customers in the way that they wanted. They had a pretty slow system, and it was difficult, and they were falling behind their competition in terms of being able to interact with their customers, create new products, bring new products to market, and sell those products to their customers. So they went from, just simply by decoupling these down into microservices, we were able to bring some of the interactions and transactions down from the seconds per transaction down to hundredths of milliseconds per transaction. So really engendering a high level of agility into the systems. Another pushback I get occasionally from customers around buying a package solution is that the idea that there's no one package solution that could possibly serve the very complicated business processes they have in their core insurance systems, and so they need to build something from scratch themselves. And there may be some cases where that is true, but generally speaking, I would argue that there are solutions out there that can be done, that can be harnessed to be able to achieve that. And Direct Line Group in the UK is one example. They're a general insurer, large general insurer in the UK. They had many brands, and many of those brands had legacy systems running core systems, many of them on mainframes as well. Super complicated, super complex. And they decided to move to a software called Guidewire and moved quite quickly to do so. And so today they've moved off of the mainframe completely. They're transacting 30,000 quotes per day. They have more than 8 million policies under management today. And they process, I think, what is it? I wrote down the number here. New policies about 1 every 10 seconds. They can process a new policy. Another area of pushback that we get is that a large traditional insurer, very complex, very large insurer, with hundreds of years, or 100 years or so, of experience and policies and everything else, cannot possibly start to break down the monolith and really modernize some of these core systems. State Farm, you may have heard of, is the largest carrier, general carrier in North America, the largest auto carrier in North America. They also have a significant life business, but this is about their auto business, and in particular the claim system, which was on the mainframe, super complex, super differentiating for them too in a bad way, in that their competitors were doing a great job of processing claims quickly in a transparent way. They also recognized that they were losing the COBOL skills, they were losing them to retirement, and so they were worried about being able to maintain these critical systems over time. So we engaged with them, and this is an important point, is starting small in many cases, starting small and starting smart. So they identified a business problem. They had worked with us to figure out a way to create some proofs of concept in some other ways so that they could show the value of automated refactoring, and really started moving quickly after that. So after only about 6 weeks, we started to go into production with them. And as I mentioned earlier, the cool thing about this was the analysis, so the automated analysis that generative AI tools allow them to do. When they started to analyze all those workloads, they figured about 30% were worth refactoring. So they're going to refactor those in an automated way. They were going to rewrite or reimagine about 30% of them as well. And they were going to just simply retire the remaining 40%. So they recognized that 40% of those applications had no real business value, and were willing to retire those with their modernization program. So one last point, I just wanted to highlight that, as many of you probably already know, that we are working very closely with many of you, hopefully in the room, and thank you for your business, but across the value chain, from the digital enablement and customer experience, data and data analytics, AI, ML, generative AI as well, and all in migration too, working very closely with many of you who are in the room today. So again, thank you for your business, and take a look at that. So some key takeaways from this. First and foremost, hopefully, there's no surprise that modernizing your core systems, decoupling those core systems has business value. So starting there is extremely important with that business value. The second point is that having that business focus in mind is extremely important, knowing what you're trying to achieve and having that strategic view so that you're not setting yourself up for more legacy in the future too. And third, of course, we have partners, experts out here who are in the Korean market as well, myself and others on the global team, to support you in your transformation journey. And hopefully you can be able to take advantage of that. I do have a few minutes, I think 7 minutes for questions. So with that, I will say 감사합니다. Thank you very much.
감사합니다. Thank you very much, Mr. Buechner, for your insightful presentation. So we're going to have a Q&A session. Please put on the receiver for this part. 네, 말씀하신 것처럼 시간이 남아 있습니다. 여러분 질문 충분히 해주셔도 좋습니다. 손 들어주시면 저희가 마이크를 전달하겠고요. 그리고 동시 통역 서비스를 제공하고 있기 때문에 한국어, 영어 다 좋습니다. 편한 언어로 말씀해 주시면 되겠습니다. 네, 손 들어주시면 마이크 저희가 전달할게요. Okay. Any other question from the floor?
No questions?
코멘트도 좋습니다. 의견도 좋고요. 질문도 좋습니다. 서로 소통하는 그런 시간 됐으면 좋겠습니다. 질문이 없으신가요? 질문 있습니다.
Excellent.
Over there, please.
Thank you for being brave.
Thank you for your presentation. And I want to confirm that, is I understand it correctly, I think you emphasized the importance of the data science and how to rely and how we transaction on the data. Is that right?
Absolutely. I think that in order to take full advantage of generative AI and traditional AI, machine learning as well, modernizing those core systems is essential to getting that done. And that needs to be thought of as one of the key first steps in your journey toward taking advantage of these new technologies and capabilities.
Then the transaction for the modern digital types and that kinds. There's other things.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I quite understand.
When we have a data,
Mhm.
and then the core system can rewrite and some transactions, and that is mainly focused on the transaction on the modern digital, some like a rewrite and that kinds of it.
Yes, in order to be a modern digital business, in order to be able to engage with customers in the way that they expect to be engaged with, modernization of those core systems is key to that. One thing I think important to that is like any industry, I think and particularly with generative AI, we may be investing in some areas simply because it is a cool, innovative new technology. And in many cases, the senior leadership may say, hey, you really need to be doing something in generative AI. What are we doing in generative AI? But starting with that, which is maybe okay, but as long as you have that business goal in mind, so interacting more digitally with the customers, for example, improving the claims process, doing better underwriting, whatever that business goal that you're trying to achieve, working backwards from there, beginning that modernization journey so that you can take advantage of those capabilities.
Then it's about the domain and data side.
Absolutely. Data is our most important asset in insurance. It's often locked up in silos, so we can't take full advantage of it. So part of that modernization journey is getting that data into a place that we can run analytics against it, start to build a better understanding of our customers, and engage with them in the way that they expect to be engaged with.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. 다른 질문 있으실까요? Is there any other questions over there? Yes, please. 마이크 전달하겠습니다.
Thanks for your presentation, by the way. So my questions, so I have two questions, and they're somewhat connected, I guess. So I was quite impressed by how your organization, with the skills in the technologies, to be able to solve the legacy codes that existed, and to be able to somewhat, be able to explain, or in the process of maintaining, or to I guess transfer over to the sort of more modernized codes, for your State Farm cases, for example. Was there a case like that in Korea or in the APAC region? Like, was there a case where your organization was able to solve the, be able to solve a case like that? And then my other question to be connected with this is that about how the regulatory there's a constraint exists to adopt a more modernized data housing, I guess, so to say. And was there a case where you were able to sort of infiltrate that and bring it, utilizing the AWS to put the systems to more sort of in a modernized way? I hope that
No, I
makes sense.
understand.
Yeah.
Good questions. So I will leave it up to my Korea colleagues to talk about some of those use cases that are up there, but absolutely we're engaging with Korean customers in the generative AI space, as well as the core modernization and migration. But I think there are a couple cool use cases relatively close by that I was involved with in Japan with SBI Life. And one of those use cases both use cases are around the customer engagement mechanisms that they have, and in particular their call centers. So two pieces of it. This is very common in insurance, and I'm sure here in Korea as well, where call center representatives and agents tend to churn out quite quickly. They're around for a short period of time. It's expensive to train them up. They're some level of success, and then they run out of steam, basically, and end up churning out. So both the customer service representatives on the phone, as well as the agents it's a long time to train them up. It's expensive, and they do not last in the organization for very long. And there are a variety of reasons for that, but generative AI, in this one case, two parts of it. One is accelerating the training process, so lowered the time to train their new customer service representatives by, I think it was 30% is the target. So being able to train them much more quickly and get them to the point where they can be effective employees, making them less frustrated in their employment and more successful, and thus keeping them around for a longer period too. The second part of that is that they're harvesting information from successful customer service reps and agents to be able to create knowledge paths and quick FAQs and question and answer capabilities, AI assistance to help them in their interactions with the customers. To really help them allow them to be much more successful, happier employees, and thus allow them to stay around longer than they might otherwise, but at the same time lowering the cost of actually training them. That's one example I would think of in that space, in the Asia Pacific space. And given time, I'll just mention the other side of it. I have plenty of case studies. We can talk about it afterwards as well if you want. But on the regulatory side, there is a lot going on there. What I love about modernization overall, not necessarily the generative AI aspect of it, but modernization, core modernization overall, and improving data access is that you are both meeting the goals of transparency, overall risk management and profiling around that to the regulators, but at the same time achieving some of these goals of getting that data in a place that you can run other analytics against it as well. The regulators generally want to see that you understand your customers from the data perspective. Do you understand your customers? Do you have the right risk profile for them? Do you have enough reserves, of course, to pay for claims? All these things, if you set them up to be able to do that for the regulators, should allow you to do some of the other capabilities that we're talking about in terms of understanding your customers better, creating new products, and leveraging generative AI to support them as well.
Well, thank you very much for the insightful question and answer. Maybe one last question due to time constraints. 마지막 질문 하나 정도 더 받을 수 있을 것 같은데요. 질문 있으십니까? Okay, so it seems that there are no further questions from the floor. With that, we conclude this session. Thank you very
Thank you very
much
much.
once again. 여러분
감사합니다.
박수 부탁드리겠습니다.